So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacturer hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.
Welcome to today's Energy Show. Tesla is now taking reservations for their solar roof tiles. They announced that they will start selling them in California this year in 2017, and they're going to be rolling them out to the rest of the country in 2018 and beyond. Now, they announced these roof products back towards the end of 2016, and now they're actually starting to trickle out more details. The most important of which is how much are they going to cost and how much power are they going to generate. So we're getting a lot of customers and potential solar customers who are wondering if they should get Tesla solar roof tiles or ordinary solar. Now, on today's show, we're going to try and provide some information so that customers can make an educated decision for themselves. Now, it's kind of tricky to do this because there's really not a ton of information out there. But we did a show last year about the Tesla solar tile announcement. Now, here's what I said, and I still believe it 100%. This is a very, very cool product. Now, there's lots of hype about the tiles, and they just look really good. Basically, the concept is if you have a roof, why don't you make the roofing material out of some material that's going to generate power? Why don't you make the roofing material solar? Now, I've been putting in solar panels since 2001, and I've installed a bunch of different products like this. It's called building integrated photovoltaic. Basically, the solar material substitutes for a type of building material. And I've installed these products from a number of different manufacturers. Now, the good thing is that there's more information now about the costs of the Tesla tiles and how much they're going to generate. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of confusion. It's just not clear what kind of rooftop and what kind of customer is really going to benefit from this product. So, on today's show, we're going to really take two perspectives about these solar roof tiles. First, what are the economics and choices for homeowners, for customers? You got a house, you're thinking about solar, you want it to look really good. What about Tesla? So we're going to answer that question. And the second, what are the implications for installing these roof tiles on your roof? Yeah, that's something that's really important to companies like Cinnamon Solar, any local installer that's going to do the installation. How does a building integrated photovoltaic product work? And is this something that's going to make sense? Okay. So here's the questions we're going to answer. How much is it going to cost? How much will a regular solar roof cost? Are there any special installation requirements? Any special maintenance? And what about the warranty? Okay, so the way we approach this is we just kind of looked at a typical home in Silicon Valley. Now, there's lots of variability with homes, but we looked at a typical 2,000 square foot home with a 2,500 square foot roof. Obviously the roof area, since it's sloped, is more than the floor space of the home. And with this home also has a $200 per month electric bill, $2,400 per year. Now, anytime your electric bill is over about $75 to $100, you're a good prospect for solar. People with a $200 electric bill, you should run, not walk. Just pick up the phone now and find a way to get solar on that roof because your payback's going to be pretty good. So the question is, what's the cost of a Tesla roof for this typical Silicon Valley home? Now, what's new is Tesla has released a calculator on their website. It's a cost calculator where you can type in your zip code, the size of the home, the size of your roof, some other characteristics, and find out what's it going to cost for a solar roof and what's it going to generate. Now, the Tesla solar installations are going to be done, at least initially, with their SolarCity subsidiary. SolarCity is a great installer. They operate all over the country. They got some really good capabilities, and they're actually going to do the roofing work and the technical wiring of the solar roof tiles. Now, when I looked at this typical house, I assumed that there would be 40% of the roof covered with solar tiles. And the way the Tesla solar tiles work, and this is common with some other products, is there's no point in putting expensive solar roof tiles in areas that are shaded. Maybe on the north roof, maybe in an area that's shaded by a tree. So the way it's designed is there are solar tiles and dummy tiles. And since most of the roof doesn't need to be solar and a lot of the roof is shaded, I assume that 40% of the coverage of the roof is going to be done with solar tiles. Now, I don't have the details inside their calculator, but I also assume that when they did the calculator, that they're assuming that 40% that's covered is basically towards the south and unshaded. And the rest of the roof, 60% of the roof, is going to have dummy tiles, which are going to be less expensive. Now, in addition to kind of keeping the cost down and to make this a better comparison, Tesla's pushing their Powerwall, which is a battery storage system. I just assumed that there's no Powerwall installation at this time. That just makes it simpler. We're able to compare apples to apples a little bit better. So here are the results from the Tesla solar calculator using those assumptions. $58,500 for the cost of the solar roof. Those are the dummy tiles and the real tiles, everything wired up, assuming ready to go. Now, the tax credit on that would be $12,600, and I calculated the tax credit differently than Tesla. Tesla assumed that you can get the tax credit on the entire roof. I'm going to be conservative and assume that the tax credit is calculated the same way you do a tax credit whenever you re-roof. Tax credit is calculated only on the area that's solar. So it's a little bit of a lower tax credit. Okay, here are the results from the Tesla calculator. $58,500 for the total cost of the roof. Their number is $12,600 for the tax credit and $81,200, which is the value of the energy savings over 30 years at a 2% annual escalation rate. And that's a really important number because I use that number to back out what the annual savings are. Now, when they did the calculation, they also assumed that electric rates increase at 2% a year, so I kind of use that number to kind of back things out. Now, note that cost of the Tesla roof doesn't include any structural reinforcements that may be necessary. Okay, now, what does that mean? Well, when we kind of talk to homeowners, we like to use the metric of simple payback for comparisons. That simple payback assumes that the energy escalation rate, Tesla has a 2% energy escalation rate, is about the same as the interest rate or the discount rate. It's a fair approximation. I mean, you can get about 2% after tax on investments. If the energy escalation rate is 2%, then you don't need to calculate those two things. They wash out. So it's a fair approximation. So in order to figure out the annual savings, if you save $81,200 over 30 years, that works out to an annual savings of almost exactly $2,000. So we know that the Tesla solar roof for this house is going to save $2,000. Now, what's the total cost? Well, Tesla calculated the total cost. They figured out the total was going to be about $58,500. I calculated a little bit differently. I want to be conservative because the IRS rules say that solar is eligible for the 30% tax credit. All right. Now, there's one other thing regarding the investment tax credit. The IRS rules say that the roofing that's related to solar is eligible for the tax credit if it's underneath the solar, anything that's directly related to the solar system. If it's not directly related to the solar system, you can't get the tax credit on it. At least that's the way I conservatively interpret those IRS rules. So it's customary in the industry, if you're re-roofing, you can say, all right, well, we're going to re-roof the part of the roof that's underneath the solar or in the area of the solar. You get a tax credit on that, but the rest of the roof you don't because you need to do it anyway. All right, it's really up to your tax advisor, but to be conservative, when I calculated the numbers, I only applied the tax credit to the area that's covered by solar. So the tax credit I calculated is $7,020 instead of the $12,600 calculated by Tesla. It doesn't make a really big difference. Anyway, so here's the numbers I ended up with. The net cost for the Tesla solar roof after the tax credit is about $51,480 and a savings of $2,000. That works out to be, drum roll, simple payback of 26 years. So if you want to put a Tesla solar roof on your house, it's going to give you a payback of about 26 years. Now, how does that compare to traditional solar panels? What are your alternatives? Well, in order to get a $2,000 per year savings for a house in Silicon Valley, you're going to need about a 5,500 watt solar system. And the cost to that is going to be about $17,000 or $18,000 or $12,300 after the 30% tax credit. The simple payback is 6.2 years. All right, so 26 years for the Tesla roof, it's going to look great. 6.2 years for ordinary solar panels, you're going to have those, black skylight-looking things on your roof. Now, let's look at it one other way. What if the customer needs to re-roof? How do the economics change? All right, now let's look at re-roofing a 2,500 square foot roofing section, composition shingle in Silicon Valley. That's about $12,300. And you get a tax credit on some of that roofing, and I figured that out. So that if you were to put in solar and re-roof at the same time and get somewhat of a tax credit, your total cost with re-roofing is going to be about $23,000. That works out to a 12-year payback compared to 26 years for Tesla. All right, so now let's do the re-roofing calculation one more time but assuming that you're going to re-roof with a really cool-looking tile roof. Now, this almost never happens. In over 15 years, I've only had one customer that ever re-roofed from comp shingle to a tile roof. It's very expensive. In that case, the re-roofing and the solar is $47,000. That's a 24-year payback. So here's where it makes sense. If you're going to be re-roofing with a tile, or if you just really care about the aesthetics, Tesla's good. If you're just looking at saving money on solar, way, way, way better off just using ordinary solar panels. But next, we're going to kind of dig into some of the other numbers. All right. Now, Tesla has really good information about the total cost of their roofing system, the product and the installation. They don't break it down separately, but there's still a lot of technical questions about the characteristics, about the installation methods, and the electronics that are part of a Tesla installation. We really don't have any good information here other than speculation. But guesses are really helpful for people in the industry to understand the installation of the system, the maintenance, and the durability of these tiles and the associated electronics. So let's look at some of the basic characteristics of the Tesla tiles. Now, this continues to be based on our estimate of a 2,000 square foot house with 2,500 square feet of roofing space on which the dummy Tesla tiles and the Tesla solar tiles are installed. And it's also based on the prices from Tesla's calculator. So kind of looking at these numbers, you can kind of, figure out that the solar tiles cost $42 a square foot. So every square foot of solar tiles is going to cost you $42. Now, that sounds really expensive, but you got to remember that includes the installation, that includes the wiring, that includes their profit, that includes the electronics, it includes everything. Now, the ordinary tiles, these are just, special tiles that look exactly the same, cost about $11 a square foot. Now, $11 a square foot, kind of in the ballpark for concrete or slate tiles. $42 a square foot, really expensive, but there's a lot that goes along with that. Now, the traditional system that would generate $2,000 of electricity a year is a 5,500 watt DC system. This is once again for what applies in Silicon Valley. I'm going to assume the same thing for Tesla. Now, with that assumption, that means that the Tesla tiles put out about 5.5 watts of power per square foot. Now, that's not a really high output, but you got to remember that these tiles aren't all solar cells. There's edges around them. And you also have to remember that these tiles run very hot, so they're not going to put out as much power as a regular high-efficiency solar panel. Now, also keep in mind, Tesla's going to make two profiles of these tiles. There's the flat tiles, and there's also curved tiles. These curved tiles aren't going to be released until 2018. These are for barrel tile roofs. And you got to also remember that the curved tiles are not going to put out as much power as the flat tiles because the sun's not always going to be perpendicular to the tiles. Okay, so just kind of crunching through the numbers again, the cost of the totally installed solar roof system is $7.64 per watt of tiles. That includes the installation. Now, that's really pricey. That's like over twice as much as a regular installation, but you got to remember you're getting the roof in there too. And it also depends a lot on the size of the roof. And in this case, it's that 40% example. Now, I really tried to figure out specific information about the wattage per tile, the tile efficiency, and things like that. It's kind of hard to come up with guesses at this time because Tesla doesn't break out the cost of the tiles themselves because they're not selling the tiles themselves. They're selling complete installations. So until they unbundle those prices or until we got some more data, you really can't speculate. But, from a homeowner standpoint, we already have the information of how much they're going to charge, and that's really what's relevant. Now, we also know that these tiles are going to run hotter than traditional solar panels. Now, even with high-efficiency cells, these things are going to be warm, and heat is the enemy of efficiency with solar. So, you can really, really clearly see it. When these solar panels are in the bright, hot day sun on the roof, the output is lower than on a cool day. Why? Because the solar cells are very sensitive to temperature. Higher the temperature, the more resistance, the less power they put out. Okay, what about some of the physical characteristics of these tiles? Well, Tesla's disclosed that. It's really cool on their website. Each tile is about 14 inches wide and 8.65 inches high. It's kind of like the size of a European piece of, or a legal size piece of paper. Now, I'm not sure about how thick the tiles are or how much overlap goes between the tiles because Tesla really doesn't show you the profile on the back of the tile. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But the important thing to remember that these tiles, just like regular roofing tiles, must have grooves and must overlap in some way so that as water comes down, the water flows from the top of one tile lower down to the next tile. It doesn't go between the tiles and underneath the tiles and into the roof underneath. So there's got to be some, pretty tricky edges and profiles and water draining grooves that go along the side and on the back of the tiles. And these grooves also have to be waterproof and able to handle freezing and thawing, because water's going to get in there a little bit, they're going to freeze, and you have to make sure that doesn't kind of dislodge a tile. As far as the dimensions on the back of the tile, no clue yet. We've never, at least I haven't seen any article that shows what the profile of the back of the tile is. They also have to be fastened to the roof somehow. So when you look at what is kind of analogous as a slate, there's holes in the slate, and that's kind of where the slates get nailed in. Conventional flat concrete roof tiles have little ridges and grooves, so they kind of interlock, and then they go over this wooden strip called a batten that's behind the tile, and that kind of gives them that little tilt. So we don't really know how that's going to be done yet. Another thing that we don't know is what kind of underlayment goes underneath the tiles. Now, almost all roofing materials have waterproof roofing paper between the shingles or the tiles and the roof sheathing. So you kind of look at a traditional roof on a house. You've got plywood, or newer homes have this thing called OSB, oriented strand board. It's kind of like a wafer board. And then on top of that wafer board, they put black roofing paper. And the roofing paper kind of goes from the bottom up. There are 3-foot rolls, 4-foot rolls, and that way there's no seams into which water can go. And once that roofing paper is nailed onto the roof, then you put the ordinary shingles down. If you're using a tile roof, once that roofing paper is in place, they put these little batten strips. They're little pieces of wood, maybe half an inch thick by an inch thick, and they're nailed down to the roof, and that actually provides the angles for the tiles. So we don't really know what's behind those tiles. The other thing is, the other solar roofing tiles that I've installed always required a fireproof roofing material between the solar tiles, the solar shingles, and the roof surface. So it's not clear yet if Tesla tiles are going to need this extra layer of protection. This is a fire code requirement, and it's possible that they've got the design of the system so that there's no possibility of any electrical short behind the tile, and they don't need that, but we don't really know. The other big question, this is what lots of people have asked about, it's kind of the first thing that occurred to me, is how the heck do you wire up these tiles? There's really no clue about the wiring and the connections. As I mentioned, I've installed a bunch of different products, and some of them were like each individual tile had to be wired together. These tiles might be 6 watts or 12 watts. Sometimes they have a group of solar cells together in a bigger tile that might be like 30 or 40 watts per tile, done in different ways. But there's always wires that go between these shingles. And the way the wires are routed is also kind of a question. Sometimes there's a trunk cable or a cabling scheme that goes on the surface of the roof behind the tiles. In other cases, and this is like the AstroPower product that I installed, you actually had to drill 2 holes into the attic for every single tile. And then you're kind of sitting there with little wire nuts or connectors behind. That way you could wire everything up. It really sounds kind of clunky, but the good news is if you ever have a problem, it's easier to find it that way. So I kind of have a lot of questions whether there's individual wiring or if the tiles have some kind of interlocking wiring connector. Dow did a really cool thing where the tiles actually had a little connector between the tiles. So maybe that's what Tesla's doing also. It would kind of make sense if they were to string 5 tiles or 10 tiles in series, because then that would match the kind of voltage and current that we have in traditional 60-cell panels. Those 60-cell panels have 3 strings of 20 cells kind of wired together. That would kind of match it, and that make it easier to do the control electronics. But we really don't know yet. So I'm just going to assume, when you look at the pictures, there's no wiring in sight, and that means obviously that all the wiring is either behind the tiles or in the attic or in a small gap between the tiles and the surface of the roof. And eventually all these wires have to be gathered together in some kind of conduit because it's all going to be DC, and that has to go over to the inverter. Now, another big question, and this is one of the things that hits the installers pretty hard, is there's a new requirement called rapid shutdown. It's very tricky to meet these rapid shutdown requirements. These began in the 2014 electrical code, and the requirement tightened up in the 2017 code. The only 2 ways to get around it are either to limit the voltage within the array to 80 volts, or to have everything behind a part of the array to be non-metallic, including the conduit. So it'll be interesting to see how Tesla kind of manages that. All right, so rapid shutdown, tricky. You can do it with electronics. But speaking about electronics, it's kind of a question. I'm assuming that these tiles are designed to work with the Tesla Powerwall and probably also a Tesla inverter. So there's going to be some kind of electronics or a bypass diode or an optimizer chip on the back of each tile or an optimizer that manages a group of tiles together. So kind of got into the technical details, but what do all these characteristics mean to customers? Well, traditional solar is pretty straightforward. The wiring is either external or in the attic. Tesla tiles, not clear where the wiring is going to go, but SolarCity is going to do the job, and if it's guaranteed, it should be okay. It's going to be a lot of work to do the wiring, probably a lot more than regular systems, but that's why the price is a little bit higher. Not clear if there's going to be any structural requirements for reinforcing the roof. If you have a composition shingle roof and you put heavier tiles on there, you may need to reinforce that roof. If you have a tile roof or the roof was designed for tile, the Tesla tiles are probably fire. And also really not sure about the rapid shutdown and fire safety requirements for Tesla. Now, as far as special maintenance requirements, I think the rain's going to clean those things off just fine. You probably can walk on the tiles and you can't walk on regular tiles. As far as the warranties, 30 years for solar tiles, 25 years for traditional panels. Tesla says there's an infinite warranty on the tiles for waterproofing. Yeah, I mean, shingles last, concrete shingles or slates last pretty much forever. So, forever is okay. But the solar part, only 30 years. So my conclusion for homeowners interested in Tesla tiles, this is, for my friends and neighbors and customers who are calling and asking, the economics from Tesla are pretty transparent. If you have an existing composition shingle roof, if you want to put regular solar on, your payback's going to be about 6 years. The payback for installing a Tesla tile roof is 26 years. So at the end of the day, unless you have an extra $30,000 or $40,000, the Tesla roof tiles are really for new construction applications. Or they're good for people who put a tremendously high value on aesthetics and want to just completely change the look of their house and, got an extra $30,000 or $40,000 to spend. All right, well, that's all the time we have on this week's Energy Show, and thanks to all of our listeners for joining us. If you missed any of today's show, you can always go to our website at cinnamonsolar.com and listen to the podcasts.
So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacturer hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.